Okay, so it's really difficult not to be elitist about the paleo diet and the way that I eat in the face of the tide of evidence in the archaeological record and the epidemiological record that is so devastating and so comprehensive against any other lifestyle habit that it's very difficult not to speak out against. Now, I don't doubt that a carefully constructed vegan diet is far superior to the standard American diet of processed garbage. But I don't think it's advisable to recommend that a diet that absolutely requires long term supplementation of vitamin B12 and long chain fatty acids in the form of omega 3s, or you will basically, it boils down to this, you'll come down with pernicious anemia and depression. You got to ask yourself where you got the belief that animal fat is bad for you. Usually it's a belief that we've inherited. The revulsion to fat and the revulsion to beef is a learned cultural thing. Unfortunately, we grew up in a society that has deleted all of our rich hunters' history and hunters' lore from all of our textbooks. We've been disenfranchised and disenchanted from our roots so that we could be sold heart healthy grains, which are absolutely poisonous. By the way, birds and rodents evolved to eat seeds, not human beings. That's just a fact. Most grains have to be soaked for hours and hours and hours just so they're not poisonous. And grains, honestly, at the very best case scenario, are non-nutritious, and at the worst case scenario, downright poisonous. Um, and so let's get into the heart of the matter. The vegan camp that has become very in vogue, and a lot of youngsters have joined, um, plays out something like a science fiction plot. Okay, and it's sort of got a religious recension sort of woven into the infrastructure of it all. And the reason I say it's science fiction is because basically what vegans what especially raw vegans are trying to do is they're trying to create a super overclass of new generation human beings that can live and sustain on just fruits and vegetables, which completely is overambitious and it completely ignores our multi-million year history of animal husbandry, cattle worship, and hunting compatibility, which is what we've been doing since the dawn of early man. And so it's sort of this futuristic plot line to save the burning planet, and it's all under the banner of social reform, and you're going to heal the ecological world soul because it's more sustainable, blah blah fucking blah. And again, it's at the expense of millions of years of DNA and blueprinting that's been inscripted and encoded as your expression to be a hunter. It's complete disregard. And so what this does is this creates sort of a psychosis because you're severed off from your intuitional roots, and it creates sort of this subculture of religious zealotry where basically what you're doing, it's not esteemable, because what you're basically doing is you're elevating the life of animals above your own. It's very self-sacrificial, and it's also um, basically a form of self-flagellation because you're being deprived of your complete nutritional biome, and you're also um, basically in an altered state, because when you are in deprivation and in sensory deprivation, you're in an altered state of consciousness. And, I believe that they're trying to basically create an overclass of poets, sculpturists, artists, dancers that are all peaceful and harmonious and live in the woods and basically are beast lords, that animals congregate together and everybody's one big happy family. And like I said, this is in complete disregard of the evidence. So the last time that human beings were eating purely fruit, you got to go back to about 10 million years ago during the Miocene era, where little 250 cc brained little savanna apes, very tiny, were roaming around in the climax tropical equatorial rainforest of Africa, and they were facultatively bipedal, which means they could rise up on two legs and take short little scurried steps, and they'd have to go back on all fours, swing from the trees, and eat ripe fruit. Now, that's the last time that our shared ancestor was eating a purely fruit diet. Now we got to go back to 6 million years ago. Little chimpanzees are primarily frugivores, but in the dry season, in the winter, because fruit is seasonal and doesn't grow in the winter, little chimpanzees, even today, modern chimpanzees, they hunt with great relish. They actually hunt other little monkeys and eat meat. They eat about a hamburger patty's worth of meat a day, and they enjoy it, and it is part of their nutritional panel during that season. So even little monkeys eat meat, even those little 350cc relatively modern chimpanzees. So when you hear vegans spouting off about how our common ancestors eat nothing but fruit and veggies, okay, that's fucking fantastic. Their brains are literally tiny. They have not managed to evolve or leave the tropical rainforest for 6 million years, where, by the way, you have dengue fever, Chagas disease, necrotic fasciitis, leishmaniasis, all these very insidious diseases, malaria, that they have to deal with and cope. And like I said, they haven't found a way to leave the rainforest. They're still there. So you cannot say that eating fruit and vegetables is the natural primal way of a human being whatsoever. Now let's take it a step further. Here's where the evidence is completely devastating. Our brains are about 4 times the size of a typical chimpanzee. Okay, we also have opposable thumbs. We have great tool making capacity, and we've got a whole intellectual and psychological system that no other species has. Now, in order to make room for such massive, explosive, meteoric growth in an organ, we know that we had to basically something else on the body had to shrink to allow for the accommodation of the new organ, because less energy resources were being administered towards that particular component and had to make room for the induction of the brain. Now we know that a chimpanzee's gut, about 50% of their mass is from their colon. Human beings, we've traded in a much smaller colon. Our gut is much less complicated and much more carnivorous than a chimpanzee to allow the energy expenditure to go more towards pumping these big 1500cc brains we have today. Now, that quadruple expansion happened in only 3 million years. So, and that's right around the time, by the way, where we see these 1500cc brains, where we find compelling evidence of disarticulated animal bones with cut marks in them, where we start to see where humans actually found a way to use tools, stone tools, to cut and deflesh meat. And that explains why it was no longer a matter of who had the swiftest claw or the sharpest fang. We didn't need that as predators because we were using tools to scrape our meat and also to kill meat in the form of harpoons, spears, or whatever other little gimmicks that we used to ambush and trap animals. Now, it doesn't take very much intelligence whatsoever to pick fruit or dig for vegetables. Warthogs can dig for potatoes, monkeys can claim fruit. But to be an apex predator, to have the faculties and the energies that we have of visual acuity to hone in on an animal and stalk and ambush and plant traps and trap animals into natural land features like the great Native Americans did on the Great Plains of Canada, they were geniuses. They used to, basically, they would get their finest and fastest runners in the tribe, and they would sprint at a big herd of bison, and they would get the bison to run away on these big, steep, sheer cliff faces. And they would scare them, and they would be so frightened that they would literally run off the edge of the cliff, and they would fall to their death below. And guess what? The Native Americans had these big quarantine systems of fences to trap them in these big pens, and they would have food for months and months and months at a time and share with like 70 other tribes, and they had these big familial festive communities. And that's basically, that shows the heartfelt tendency that humans had towards hunting. And it was actually a gregarious social gathering where people would hunt and then share their kills, and you would take these nomadic tribes and move across the plains. And it was just a sensational, I believe that it nurtured the spirit and the soul, and that it allowed for it basically squashed any possibility of developing any kind of psychosis and neurosis. And now think about it today. we've been completely disenchanted and disenfranchised from that process. We can't kill our own meat anymore. Some people do. It's very rare. We're contained in these zoo-like exhibits now, in these virtual realities that we created in the form of cities with big spiky skyscrapers, upper level high rises and apartments. We're so far removed from that hunter's tradition that I believe that it causes a disturbance, a psychic wound that we need to heal deeply from. Because when you take a multi-million year evolutionary history trait and you eviscerate it and you sever a human being from that relationship that we had towards the animals and the land, I believe that it creates all kinds of psychic phenomenon and disturbances that we can't even put our fingers on. So it's really important to recognize this. Mother Nature, scattered all along the land, is basically every single nutritional component individually that you need. And if you treat your life like a quest, you can go out and you can hunt. Even if you're a vegan, if you combine everything meticulously correctly and you select your grains properly and combine with beans and legumes, you can get the complete nutritional biome you need to function optimally. But it's a pain in the ass. Like I said, grains are mostly poisonous. They don't process well in the human system. But check this out. Red meat is the panacea. And the reason it's the panacea is because Mother Nature, for whatever reason, consolidated the entire nutritional genome that we need to function optimally and fuel these big brains is all in a piece of grass-fed animal beef. It's got everything in it: potassium, vitamin K2, vitamin B12, loaded with heart-healthy, saturated fats that are omega-3s, the same kind of omega-3 supplement that you would take in fish oil is in grass-fed beef. Completely rich in muscle-building protein so that you can have a lean physique. It's complete. And if you combine that with eggs and you use vegetables, not as a primary source of nutrition, because let's get this straight. Vegetables are very calorically minimal for human beings, okay? There's very little energy to be derived from vegetables. So you have to look at vegetables as medicinal in nature. They're not nutritional. Because in a head of asparagus, there's about 4 calories. In a pound of mixed greens, 1 full fucking pound, there's 70 calories. So what it basically amounts to is vegetables contain micronutrients and all kinds of little vitamins and minerals that basically round out and polish a well-rounded meal. So vegetables are an accompaniment. And if you're using vegetables as your primary means to function, and you think it's healthy to eat a salad that does not have any kind of meat in it or any kind of protein or any kind of fat, you're making a drastic mistake and you're going against all of your evolutionary history. Now, let's look at the state of play, okay? Because we're artists as human beings, and it's important to look at texture, and it's important to look at things with a critical eye. Look at the vegan body. You just gotta fucking look at it. It's emaciated, it looks worn out, it looks depleted, it looks weak, it looks enfeebled, and this is for a very good reason, and it is. And here's the trick, and here's where vegans have been completely fucking bamboozled. They all claim, especially the raw vegans who eat nothing but fruit, claim, look how fucking skinny we are. We're skinny, we're not fat, we beat obesity. No, you didn't. Here's what you did. When you are protein deficient and you don't have enough protein in your diet, guess what? Your body is so fucking intelligent, it will literally strip mine and cannibalize its own muscle tissue, which is composed of complete protein, and it'll slowly leach it and give you all of the essential amino acids you need to function. So vegans that think they're on a low-fat diet and on a low-protein diet are full of shit, because your body's actually cannibalizing itself. And this explains why they look emaciated. Over time, your body's slowly eating its own muscle tissue. And yes, there is evidence to suggest that when you're on a low protein diet, you do lose fat mass, but you also lose all your protein mass. So they become what's called skinny fat, which means, yeah, you're lean, you take up a little bit of space in the world, but you're fucking fat. You're squishy, you're pudgy, you're atrophied, you have no muscle capacity whatsoever. And check this out. Most raw vegans and vegans in general, their claim to fame is that they're endurance athletes, especially the ones that are eating a shitload of carbs. They love to brag about how they can run 100-mile marathons, they can bike ride 200 miles, etc. This is yet again completely antithetical to everything we know about human health in history. Persistence hunting, which would be the idea that human beings were able to chase and track down animals for long periods of time, have been completely unsuccessful. What we see is that actually in nature, humans were sprinting. And what we would do, similar to the Native Americans I told you about who chased the bison off the cliff, we would actually sprint at animals and trap them into natural land features where then we could pin them down and disgorge them or take care of them however we needed to. So when you're putting out that kind of cardiac output, I believe Marathon, the gentleman who ran the 26.2 miles that the fabled marathon is even based on, collapsed at the end of his journey, at the end of his excursion. It's not healthy to be pushing your body to that level of distance, and it's also catabolic. So when you look at the body fat content of vegans, they're actually, the average ultra endurance athlete is 18% body fat, which is astounding. And so you're looking at it and you're like, yeah, it just doesn't add up. You're not healthy. You don't look healthy, and you're holding quite a bit of fat mass, and it's all sort of couched in this sort of pretend disguise that you're lean. No, you're not fucking lean. You're skinny fat. And so you just have to look at the robustness. You look at all the lifestyle choices that people are making, and you can tell who's robust and who's not. Now, it's really interesting to note that people will also say that red meat causes cancer. I find this one to be fucking hilarious. Let's just think about this critically for a second. You are red meat. The composition of your body, you literally are red meat. And this is not a hyperbole. If you muscle and tissue are not static constructions. They're constantly being broken down and rebuilt. And when they're broken down, a lot of that material, which is large material, is passing through your body at all times. So if red meat was cancerous, you would be literally toxic to yourself. You would be divided amongst yourself. Makes no fucking sense whatsoever. Also, real quick, if you look at all herbivores in the wild, like cows, they all have these separate chambers to digest plant matter that we clearly don't have. When a cow eats grass, they have two chambers. One's called an abomasum and one's called a rumen. And these are basically these big fermentation vats where bacteria have to swarm the grass, break it down, and that bacterial waste gets burped back up into the cow's mouth. It re-chews it and then reabsorbs all the nutrients. We clearly don't have any kind of design like that whatsoever. In fact, we have very acidic stomachs. The average human stomach has a pH of between 1.5 to 3, which is a really acidic environment. Nothing rots in a vat of hydrochloric acid that's that acidic. And so you'll hear these wild mutated stories that I think are funny, like there's this myth that John Wayne died with 40 pounds of undigested beef in his system. That mutated to Elvis Presley, and now people say it's Elvis Presley that died with 40 pounds of undigested beef in his system. If you look at a colonoscopy, and you can even Google this, there's millions taken a year, people upload the results. If a colon is even impacted with 1 single pound of shit, 1 single pound, people are rushed to the emergency room and experience rectal bleeding, and you can die from being impacted even 1 pound. So the fact that people are saying that there were 40 pounds of undigested beef is a fucking crack up. It's hysterical. I'll take it a step further. Factory installed in your body is all of the natural digestive enzymes to handle meat and to handle animal protein and fat. Factory installed. You come hardwired with trypsin and chymotrypsin, which handle all of your protein, break it all down in your stomach, and you have bile salts and you have lipase, which is an enzyme that breaks down animal fat. So when you eat grass-fed, pasture-raised beef that's sustainable, it literally doesn't even go to your colon to ferment. Most of it gets dissolved in your stomach, and it literally, as it goes through your short intestine, all of that energy is absorbed completely. This is why when you take a shit, you're never going to see a steak or any kind of meat matter in your shit, But if you eat a lot of vegetables and you eat a lot of corn, you'll see the cellulosic shell of the corn come out because we just have no digestion capability for it whatsoever. So people say that meat fucks with their digestion. Well, if you've been a vegan or a vegetarian for a long time, chances are your stomach has become a lot more baseline, a lot more alkaline, which is a problem. It turns out that for digestion to truly be effective, you want to be in those lower ranges. Even a cow who eats nothing but grass, the pH in their stomach is 2, which is right around where ours are, because it turns out that digestion is always more optimal in a more acidic environment. So don't be afraid of acid. Meat gets totally digested and absorbed. It does not get trapped in your stomach whatsoever. Even the corn-fed beef does not get trapped in your stomach. It's all digested. Your body comes equipped. It knows exactly how to expropriate it. It's amazing and it's magnificent. And we need to get back to our roots and understand this is the way that we've been eating forever, and this is the healthy way to be. Now, you